For King Charles, the absence of his youngest son's children has long been a silent wound. Archie and little Lilibet, grandchildren who carry his blood, have grown up oceans away, their laughter and milestones unfolding in a land far from the crown. The king has only met them briefly, once with Lilibet, only a handful of times with Archie. To the public, this distance feels like a private tragedy, a grandfather robbed of simple joys, and children growing up without knowing their royal roots. So when whispers spread across London that Prince Harry was flying back to Britain, this time not alone, but with his children, imagination ran wild. The thought of a tender reunion, of a warm photograph bridging the family divide, was enough to stir public hope. But within the walls of Buckingham Palace, those whispers carried a different weight. For insiders, this was no quiet family visit. It was a storm about to break, because Harry's request was not for a casual meeting in the gardens or a discreet moment away from the cameras. No, he demanded that Archie and Lilibet be allowed inside the palace itself, into the heart of royal power. If you love uncovering the truth behind the palace walls, don't forget to subscribe to the Royal Elite for more untold royal stories. The story begins not with a clash of power, but with something far more human: absence. For years, the relationship between Prince Harry and his father has been fractured, and in that fracture, the bond between grandfather and grandchildren has quietly suffered. King Charles has met Lilibet only once, a fleeting introduction that felt more like a passing courtesy than a family moment. Archie, slightly older, has seen his grandfather only a handful of times. These are not the numbers of a close-knit family, but of strangers who happen to share blood. For a royal household that prides itself on legacy and lineage, this absence has been a silent wound, whispered about but never healed. When news broke that Harry was returning to the United Kingdom, excitement flickered across the headlines. This time, however, the whispers carried an extra spark. He was bringing Archie and Lilibet with him. To the public, it sounded almost poetic. Two children finally meeting their grandfather on familiar soil. There was talk of smiles, of hugs, of a photograph that could heal years of bitterness in a single frame. In the minds of many, this could have been the beginning of reconciliation. But inside Buckingham Palace, hope turned to suspicion. The monarchy does not deal in sentimentality the way ordinary families do. Every move is political, every appearance calculated, and every child with royal blood is a symbol as much as a human being. Archie and Lilibet are not just Charles's grandchildren, they are seventh and eighth in line to the throne. Their presence in London would not have been seen as a private visit, but as a staged re-entry into royal life. And so, what the public imagined as a sweet reunion was to insiders the opening move in a dangerous game, one that would soon explode into open conflict. Buckingham Palace has always stood for something greater than stone walls and gilded halls. To the outside world, it may look like a home, but within the monarchy, it represents sovereignty, authority, and centuries of unbroken tradition. To Harry, the request might have seemed simple: let my children visit their grandfather. But to King Charles, the request was nothing short of audacious. He was not being asked to welcome family into his private residence. He was being asked to open the gates of the institution itself. This is the line many fail to grasp. Charles may be a father and a grandfather, but above all, he is king. And kings do not bend protocol for sentiment. Allowing Archie and Lilibet into the palace would not be a harmless act of kindness. It would be interpreted as an endorsement, a signal to the world that the Sussex children are embraced within the heart of the monarchy, despite their parents' very public rejection of royal duty. To Charles, that was unacceptable. His response was swift and unmistakable. There would be no negotiation, no compromise. The answer was a firm and final no. Insiders describe it not as a conversation, but as a command. It was the cold weight of authority, slamming down like iron. And in that moment, the personal and the political collided. Harry's plea as a son ran headfirst into Charles's responsibility as a monarch. The rejection was not spoken as a father turning away his child, but as a sovereign defending the sanctity of his crown. For Harry, the sting was twofold. He had reached out for familial warmth and was met instead with the unyielding force of royal duty. It was not just a door being closed, it was a throne reminding him exactly where he stood, outside. The sting of Charles's rejection became sharper when paired with Harry's own contradictions. For years, Harry has insisted that Britain is unsafe for his family. He launched legal battles against the Home Office, demanding state-funded security after stepping down from royal duties, only to lose spectacularly in court. He painted the UK as a place too dangerous for his wife and children, a hostile environment where they could never feel safe. Yet now, in a dramatic twist, he was demanding entry for those same children into the most protected royal fortress in the land, Buckingham Palace itself. To palace insiders, the hypocrisy was staggering. On one hand, Harry condemned Britain as unfit for his family. On the other, he wanted his children planted in the middle of its most photographed, politically sensitive residence. It wasn't seen as a father's protective gesture. It was viewed as a blatant attempt to rewrite the narrative, to prove that Archie and Lilibet still belonged at the very core of royal life. And then came the whispers of suspicion. Staff recalled how Harry and Meghan often appeared with photographers or even production crews hovering nearby. The fear was simple but potent. If allowed inside the palace, would this family reunion quietly transform into a Netflix spectacle? Would centuries of protocol be compromised for the sake of Harry's image management? The very notion left many shaking their heads. Harry's actions no longer looked like the choices of a son yearning for connection, but of a man grasping for relevance. The contradiction was not just political, it was personal. He wanted recognition without responsibility, privilege without duty. And in the eyes of the monarchy, that contradiction was humiliating. For a prince once hailed as the golden boy of the House of Windsor, being reduced to such hypocrisy was nothing short of disgrace. If the rejection from his father was not painful enough, Harry soon discovered that he was facing this storm alone. Meghan Markle, usually quick to shape the narrative, was nowhere to be seen. No interviews, no staged photographs, no carefully leaked sources close to Meghan. Just silence. And in Meghan's world, silence is never accidental. It is strategy. Her absence spoke volumes. For the press, it was a sign that Meghan was deliberately distancing herself from the humiliation. For palace insiders, it suggested a deeper rift. Harry was carrying this burden without his partner by his side. What was once a united front against the crown now looked like a man abandoned to fight alone. The British tabloids seized on the image. Headlines framed Harry as desperate, weak and delusional, a prince reduced to begging for scraps of acknowledgement at his father's gates. For a man who once walked those halls as his birthright, the reversal was brutal. The palace did not simply deny entry to Archie and Lilibet, it reminded the world that Harry himself was no longer welcome inside. To the public, this was more than a private family feud. It was a spectacle of pride and power. The king had drawn a line, and Harry stood on the wrong side of it. The rejection stripped away whatever illusions remained of reconciliation. Psychologically, the impact was devastating. Harry's identity has always been torn between two worlds, the son seeking love and the Duke seeking recognition. Now, in one swift moment, both identities crumbled. He was neither embraced as family nor respected as royalty. He was left isolated, standing outside the gates, prince by birth, but outsider by decree. Rejection is never easy, but rejection from one's own family cuts deeper than any blade. For Prince Harry, the denial at Buckingham Palace was not just about being refused entry, it was a symbolic exile. In the private world of father and son, it was the ache of love withheld. But in the public realm of king and subject, it was humiliation, laid bare for all to see. Psychologists often note that humans crave two essential forms of validation: belonging and recognition. Harry has spent years chasing both. By leaving the monarchy, he hoped to craft a new identity free from the shadows of his past. Yet, by constantly reaching back toward the palace, he reveals the truth. His need for royal acknowledgement has never left him. The palace walls he once abandoned have become the very gates he cannot stop knocking upon. This contradiction is the essence of his downfall. Harry demands acceptance, yet resists responsibility. He longs for the privileges of his birthright, yet rejects the duties tied to them. In the eyes of his father, this is not love denied, but boundaries enforced. For Charles, the crown cannot bend to sentiment, not even for blood. And so, Harry finds himself in a cruel limbo, too distant to be embraced as family, too rebellious to be trusted as royalty. The rejection burns twice, first as a son abandoned, second as a prince dethroned. In the psychology of power, rejection is a weapon. It strips the individual of status, dignity, and belonging. For Harry, the message was unmistakable. He is no longer of the palace, but outside it. And perhaps that, more than anything, is the pain he cannot bear, that the world now sees him not as heir, not even as spare, but as an outsider to his own story. In the end, this was never just a family disagreement. It was a confrontation between blood and crown, between a father's love and a king's duty. By refusing Harry's request, King Charles sent a message that echoed far beyond the palace gates. The monarchy comes first, and even family cannot bypass its rules. For Charles, this was about protecting the institution, not punishing his son. But for Harry, it felt like rejection in its cruelest form. What the world saw was more than a simple no. It was a symbolic closing of doors, a reminder that Harry is no longer part of the royal circle he once called home. For a man who once walked those halls as his birthright, the reversal was brutal. The palace did not simply deny entry to Archie and Lilibet. It reminded the world that Harry himself was no longer welcome. This is the paradox of royalty. The closer you stand to the throne, the deeper the wound when you are cast aside. Harry's story is no longer just about rebellion. It is about exile and the loneliness of being a prince without a palace. So, was King Charles right to prioritize the crown over compassion? Or should a father's love always come first? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear your voice. And don't forget to subscribe to the Royal Elite for more stories from behind the palace walls. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next chapter.